Thank you so much, and thank you for being part of this wonderful world premiere. Stanley, maybe I just want to start with quick transparencies here. I understand you have a connection to Lincoln Center a little bit from your own growing up years. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Again, thank you all, and thanks so much for everybody for coming. I'm a born and raised New Yorker. I went to 9th grade at Brandeis High School, which had been Commerce, which was exactly on this spot that we're, I mean, literally, it was on 65th and Amsterdam Avenue. So, yeah.
Everyone has a connection in New York, right? What was your interest in this project, aside from being called in and asked about it, and solicited for it, of course? But why did you say yes? What was interesting to you? And what did you discover that maybe you didn't know about?
Yeah, I've done a bunch of historical films, but I don't think I've ever really done a film about New York City. I kind of had heard the story of San Juan Hill a little bit, but the idea that I was actually going to make a film about it and meet some of the former residents of San Juan Hill was just really exciting, and the chance to work with Lincoln Center. So it was really fantastic. I think part of what I learned, that was amazing, are the scenes of protest, that the community really tried to fight, but they're trying to fight, John D. Rockefeller, who's one of the richest men in the world at that point, the mayor of the city, and Robert Moses, who we couldn't give Robert Moses his evil due, but if you don't know about Robert Moses, look him up. He's a pretty evil guy.
That's a whole other movie, Stanley. Rita, you did a work in finding the interview subjects and, of course, the amazing archival footage and other important elements of the film. Could you talk a little bit about discovering and finding those folks who had lived there and what that process was like? Start with that.
I think that as a filmmaker, first I was really happy to work with Stanley because of the kind of work that he's done. I typically do biographies of people, Maya Angelou, Marian Anderson, W.E.B. Du Bois, because I think that the Black experience is one best told by the people, because the facts that we hear about are generally by the people who create them, and so they're false. And so I like the personal story. What happened in this was that I got to sit with a lot of people's personal stories, and they led me to the archival because they knew the story. It wasn't what was in history. The history had been ignored or manufactured, but it was the ability to sit down with Mavis Swire at 102 years old. Mavis Swire. It was people that knew, and then they showed you their pictures, they talked about their life, and then we had an amazing team to dig up archival, and Stanley would say, more pictures, more film, and we would just keep digging, and that process was a good process. It taught us about who we were and who this community was, and we all grew from that.
And it seems like there was just an enormous range and diversity in the people that you found, and coming from people who lived there, people who didn't live anymore. How did you find everybody? What was that process like?
If you found a historian like our historian here, who was also Hispanic, which you didn't have a lot of women's studies historical, then you found the story. When you found Deborah, you found somebody who lived in the community. And I can't even talk about all the people because there were 20 interviews, but many of you are here. One person led you to another person, and you just talked to them. And they wanted to tell this story. It was during COVID. And Mavis Swire said, come on in. We put on masks and what have you. She wanted to tell her story. And so that was what happened. They led us to people, and those people led us to people.
Virginia, as a historian, this is I'll bring up his name again, Robert Moses. I'm from the Bronx. Yeah, we heard of him in the Bronx. And, at the same time, all of this is happening here, the Cross Bronx Expressway, the Jane Jacobs fighting, the Greenwich Village Expressway. Perhaps, could you place this in the context of other things that were happening at this time and what Moses was doing?
Well, I think I said something about Moses in the film. I said some other things about him in a podcast that Lincoln Center did recently, and then I wondered, oh no, they're going to cut me out because I had to say what I had to say. And I was born in Manhattan at the age of 1, moved to the South Bronx, and I think somewhere around my midlife, I realized that what I really had to do in my life, my passion, was to recover the history of the Puerto Rican community in New York City. And so that started me on a trajectory of looking at us here, us Boricuas in our South Bronx Boricuas, and looking at our lives in this city, in the making of this city. And of course, one of the most important points that I came across, I was a child then, but it was urban renewal in the South Bronx, where my beautiful, beautiful Bronx apartment and building was going to be torn down, and I was going to be taken away from my cousins, my family, everything that I had ever known. My parents didn't consult me. We just ended up moving to Brooklyn. And I never would be able to get in touch with my feelings about the Dodgers. So it took a very long time, but that's how I began. That's how I began, this kid moving to Brooklyn and eventually going to Brooklyn College and Stony Brook and writing our story. What amazes me is that, you see, stories are the links that bind us together. Without stories, without telling each other our stories, we're sunk. And we can see that. We can see that happening today. But mostly about the how urban renewal affected me as a child. I was a teenager, okay. Was remarkable because it stripped us, a family, of everything that was important to us. And I'm not kidding, we didn't have telephones, we didn't have doctors, we didn't, the entire network that community creates, to suddenly break that and not provide for the people who were living there was an important point in my research. And it all has to do with storytelling in order to understand.
Thank you. And Deborah, you're both was former resident of San Juan Hill, but also a historian. Could you place this context and put this in a context historically, what was happening, and also share your own experience of a little? I know the smell was bad. I remember that comment. Yes, but what were the other? What are the other memories that stick with you from that time period?
Let's see. I was about 9 or 10 when the bombs went off and they really razed the neighborhood. So I lived there for a while. In terms of remembering what the neighborhood was like, it was very diverse, very, very diverse. In my building, I lived in 50 Amsterdam Avenue, and quite frankly, whenever they took pictures of Lincoln Center, like if the trees now have grown up. But if you took a picture and you were looking from Broadway in, you saw my living room, my kitchen, and bedroom, because we lived on what we called in the projects, we lived on the front. And we lived high enough so that you could really look over and see the hole that was there, et cetera. My parents were both migrants, and my father was a veteran. So, actually, if you look at and I lived in the Amsterdam projects. So this is one area in this whole strip that didn't get raised. I mean, it was already public housing, so they couldn't tear it down. I have often thought that maybe if they could have put it on a barge and taken it over to New Jersey or moved it uptown, that's what they would have done. But I watched that neighborhood totally transform. And today, I'm actually writing about this. And one of the chapters, actually the very first one, is how I became a Presbyterian, being urban renewed, or how I became a Presbyterian. Because the Baptist Church and the AME Church, they were storefront churches, but they were razed and they were torn down, and we went to Good Shepherd Faith Presbyterian Church that was actually in the heart of the protest against Lincoln Center. I became a Presbyterian, and actually at the time, to be honest, I was really happy because it meant that I didn't have to be immersed when I was baptized, that I could actually just be sprinkled in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And but actually, the time that I grew up, from the late 50s and the 60s, the neighborhood still remained very, very, very diverse. So that I went to my first Seder when I was about 10 years old. And our sister synagogue, the sister synagogue to Good Shepherd Faith Presbyterian Church, they came to us for Easter Sunday, etc. So from living in the projects, and from that perspective, it remained very, very diverse.
Stanley, what's on the cutting room floor? What? This is an hour, but I'm sure you have a lot more. What part of the story do you think is still to be revealed?
You should probably ask Rita that question. One of the things that I've done or in my makeup to keep my sanity is once it hits a cutting room floor, I forget it. It's gone, or else I would just be sitting here watching the film thinking, oh my God, what about that shot? What about that scene? So when it's gone, for me, it's kind of gone. But Rita, I don't know.
I think that there were so many good stories of the residents that we wish we could have told. And I always think editing is like combing black hair. You have to just keep combing and wet the brush and get all the kinks out and keep going. And you want everything to land. You want to go back to premise, conclusion, let the person figure it out, but land the plane. And so we had to drop stories that I felt I really wanted to hear. And some of the people that are here tonight had those stories. I think when we ended with the credit roll, we were able to tell you the future that happened to some of the people. But to see the resilience of the human being whose mother was fighting off mice, and to see her daughter become the president of a hospital, and that's Maggie Ramirez, and you would see, thank you, you would find people who had struggled through whatever that was to be resilient. And then you have people who could not. And Mavis Swire told the most beautiful stories, and she told the stories about when it was all violent, when that fighting was happening. But why was it happening? lawyers say the best deals are when everybody's a little unhappy, not when somebody's happy as they can be and the rest of the people are devastated. And that devastation, we tried to tell it, but we also tried to show the art and resilience. So a lot of those things had to hit the floor in order to comb that through and come down to that hour.
We just have time for just one more question, but I just wanted to ask Stanley what, in the context of the other documentaries that you've done, you never did something about New York. How does it feel to have done a story about your hometown, and what did you learn and feel that what did you get out of doing that from that perspective, from a personal perspective?
It feels great. I mean, this is the premiere, so it's just an incredible feeling. To make a New York story, it's I have to admit, it's a strange feeling to see this film sitting here at Lincoln Center, but it's also a great feeling, and it's an incredible story. And again, it's just my honor to be able to tell the story of the people in the neighborhood and to honor them.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And all right, we'll see the film soon.
Are there any residents that are, if you're a resident and you were in the film, or you're a resident of San Juan Hill, can you stand up?
Stand up.
Woo!
Thank you. Thank you so much.